Welcome, fellow clinicians, to today's Explainer. We're going to be diagnosing and treating those early childhood scripts that essentially forge our clients' adult identities. We spend our lives analyzing the human condition, but sometimes I find that the real key to unlocking a patient's deepest struggles lies right there in the very first messages they received about who they are.
So, why do so many adults feel like imposters in their own lives? We have literally all had that client, the one who sits down on the couch, totally disconnected from their identity, their marriage, maybe even their own body. They feel like complete imposters. And the reason? It's often because the script they're living out isn't even theirs. It was handed to them way before they had the cognitive ability to even read it.
Just to make sure we're all speaking the same clinical language today, let's look at the child ego state and the script. As you know from transactional analysis, the child ego state isn't just some cute metaphor. It literally contains a person's very first sense of identity. It holds their life script, the psychological games they play, their life positions, the whole shebang. And what's crucial here is that this script is constantly reinforced by the parent ego state, those internalized voices of their early caregivers.
Here is our agenda for this session. We'll be hitting 6 key diagnostic milestones. 1. Assessing the childhood script. 2. The clinical weight of names. 3. Play as role rehearsal. 4. Shaping gender and sexuality. 5. Healing the adapted child. And finally, 6. Rewriting the clinical narrative.
Okay, let's dive right into section 1, assessing the childhood script. Imagine a client whose internal parent dialogue is saying something as severe as, "Why did you even have to be born?" When a child hears that, their child ego state adapts, right? It usually adopts a life position of, "I'm no good," or, "Tragically, I don't deserve to live." This kind of severe negative reinforcement sets a totally devastating baseline. As clinicians, it is absolutely crucial that we actively listen for these deeply buried parent tapes. Moving on to section 2, the clinical weight of names. We actually overlook this a lot on our intake forms, but think about the cascading variations of a single name. Let's say on a birth certificate, our client is James William Stone, but listen to the emotional messages attached to how he's called. Jim implies friendship. James might activate a heavy expectation to live up to his father's standard. Jimmy comes out when his mother is pleased with him. But James William Stone, well, that immediately signals her displeasure. Each of these variations activates a totally different emotional response and expectation for our client to live up to. Let's look at the case of a boy named Egbert to see the little professor at work. Egbert, who actually grew up to be a banker, related that when he was just 7 years old, he deliberately decided to change his name to Butch. Why? To stop bullies from calling him a sissy. It's brilliant, really. It perfectly illustrates the resourcefulness of the little professor in action. That clever, intuitive part of the child's ego state just exercised its power to protect itself and completely reshape his social identity. On the flip side, names can absolutely script pathology. Take the clinical case of a 4-year-old boy whose father gave him the nickname Kicker. The dad was proud of his old swimming days and called him Kicker because he had strong legs. Well, the child adapted to this script theme aggressively. He literally started kicking other kids, teachers, family members, just to get what he wanted. He'd even brag, "I'm a real kicker, ask my daddy." So this seemingly innocent nickname unintentionally granted the child behavioral permission to act out violently. And you know what? Once the parents dropped the nickname, the behavior actually improved. All right, section 3, play as role rehearsal. When we're assessing a client's childhood play, we're really looking for that balance between the natural child and the adapted child. The natural child engages in active play, giggles, spontaneous joy. But when the adapted child is running the show, play just becomes a performance. It turns into this intense focus on beating opponents just to please a parent. Or conversely, the child becomes totally passive. Those passive observers, they grow into the adult clients who sit on the fringes of social gatherings, just watching other people live rather than jumping in themselves. This maps so perfectly onto the adult psychological games we see in our practice. Think about it. The kid who forces bandages onto an unwilling playmate, they are directly rehearsing the adult rescuer game of "I'm only trying to help you." The little boy taunting a peer with "My daddy is bigger than yours" is practicing the persecutor game called uproar. And the child faking a stomachache to get out of a race, they're rehearsing the victim game wooden leg. They are literally practicing the exact roles they'll end up playing right there in your therapy room.
Let's shift gears to section 4, shaping gender and sexuality.
There's this devastating quote from author Muriel Miller that really hits the nail on the head. He wrote, "We ordered a little girl. My baby blankets were all pink. purchased before the disaster, my birth. I mean, wow. Miller knew from day one he was considered a disappointment. This is a supreme discount of a child's born identity. When parents reject a child's biological sex like that, the child often twists themselves into knots trying to live up to the parents' expectations at the tragic expense of their own realistic sexual identification. And then we have these pervasive cultural scripts that cause massive psychological fragmentation. Take the classic, boys don't cry. The translated message there? True men hide their feelings. Or, on the flip side, a boisterous little girl swinging from a tree is told, that's not feminine. The message? True women hide their physical power. This forces our clients to totally disown their softer qualities or their aggressive tendencies. It leads to a profound deprivation of the holistic personality. This adaptation gets even more damaging when it comes to bodily sensuousness. Kids naturally explore their bodies, right? But when they're slapped or scolded for it, this deep attitude of nastiness gets imprinted. Clients will report hearing severe parent tapes like, "You'll go crazy," or "It will drop right off," or even "God will punish you." These tapes install a lifelong bodily shame that, as we all know, frequently manifests as severe sexual inadequacy in adulthood. So, what's our clinical imperative here? We have to advocate for accurate vocabulary. When parents use euphemisms, things like privates or waterworks, they are failing to give the child straight, scientific words to understand their own bodies. Without accurate words, children turn to their little professor to gather info from alleys and keyholes, or they just start using four-letter obscenities as a rebellious shock tactic. Which brings us to Section 5, Healing the Adapted Child.
Let's look at how all of this manifests in the therapy room with a case study of Ted and Alma. They were a married couple in a transactional analysis group. They genuinely liked each other. They were very committed to the marriage, but they suffered from a highly unsatisfying sex life. Alma was rarely aroused and was actually embarrassed by what she called too much touching. Ted, on the other hand, really wanted intimacy but felt completely paralyzed by his own internal scripts.
During therapy, the underlying pathology became crystal clear. Both Ted and Alma were operating under some incredibly severe parent tapes. They were hearing commands like, "Keep your hands to yourself," and "Shame on you for touching yourself there." These tapes were acting like a curse from the adopted child, fundamentally blocking their ability to experience adult intimacy. They weren't actually reacting to each other. They were reacting to the ghosts of their childhoods. And finally, Section 6, Rewriting the Clinical Narrative. As clinicians, we can help our clients follow the exact steps Ted and Alma took to dismantle these archaic scripts. Step 1, they had to identify the specific negative parent tapes playing in their minds. Step 2, they increased their adult ego state information by reading accurate scientific literature about sexuality, which bypassed all that childhood ignorance. And Step 3, armed with that adult permission, they were finally able to safely express the warm, spontaneous sensuousness of the natural child.
This really highlights our ultimate clinical goal. The therapeutic outcome isn't about removing all restraint and letting the natural child run completely wild. Not at all. It's about integrating adult rational restraint. Considering things like safety and human worth, with the warm, affectionate, and spontaneous letting go of the natural child. It's a harmonious partnership of ego states.
Which leaves us with this final diagnostic question for you to carry into your practice. Tomorrow, when your next client sits down on your couch, listen closely to their words, their tone, their posture, and ask yourself, are they speaking to you from their adult present, or are they still reciting the script of their childhood? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep listening, keep analyzing, and I will see you in our next session.